Chapter 1. Nakai was a short man, lean and strong, with leathery skin, thick black hair, and eyes lined with deep creases, as if he'd been squinting at the sun his entire life. He wore a set of wrinkled black fatigues and rested his hand on the butt of a Sig Sauer P226 pistol as he watched over the operation. Directly beside him was an 18-wheel tractor-trailer with the bright red words Wonder Bread painted on its side. 4 other trucks, each with different markings, formed a procession of rigs behind the first. A huge black man, carrying an AK-47 equipped with a tactical stock and holographic red dot sight, hurried up to him. "We're almost ready," he said. 5 minutes tops." Nakai nodded. "Put 2 vehicles to the front and 2 to the rear, with a 50 at each position." "Roger that," the big man said, his eyes narrowing slightly as he scanned their surroundings. The buildings in the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center were quiet, except for the rumble of the truck's giant diesel engines. The bodies of 3 U.S. Marshals lay on the blacktop only a few steps away. A small pool of dried vomit lay beside the closest man's mouth. "What is it, Jeb?" Nakai asked, following his lieutenant's eyes. "What do you see?" Jeb shook his head. "Nothing. I just don't like this, that's all. We've killed men before. Not like this, we haven't. Killing is killing." Jeb rubbed his hand across his chest. "I can feel the gas crawling on my skin like a bucket of spiders." Nakai patted the man's thick shoulder. "It's in your head. The siren dissipated within an hour or 2. You know that." Jeb nodded, but the scowl never left his face. "How many rifles did we get?" Nakai asked, hoping to get Jeb's mind off the gas. 2,000, maybe. All M16s. They look like old infantry training rifles. Serviceable, but they wouldn't be my first pick." "Only 2,000? Jeb shrugged. "It's what we found. I didn't figure you wanted us hanging around looking for more. Not after what we did here." "No," he said, shaking his head. "If they haven't already noticed that the post's gone quiet, they will soon. We need to be gone before they come looking for answers. As for them," Nakai motioned toward the dead marshals, "we did what we were hired to do. Our customer wanted to make a statement." "I get that, but why?" "You know I don't ask that kind of question," growled Nakai. "All I care is that we're paid for what we do." "That's all good," Jeb said, motioning to a nearby soldier to hurry it up. "But in case you haven't noticed, the world's gone to shit. What are we going to do with more money?" "Who said anything about money?" Jeb stared at him. "What then?" "We're getting the only thing that really matters anymore." "And what's that?" Nakai pressed his lips together in a tight smile. "A place at the table." Deputy Marshal Mason Raines would have traded anything in his truck for a good pair of binoculars. He stood at the back of his black Ford F-150, leaning over the top of the cab, straining to see the convoy of tractor-trailers and Humvees as they spilled out of the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center in Glencoe, Georgia. His giant Irish wolfhound, Bowie, pressed up against him, looking back and forth between Mason and the trucks down on the highway. It had been less than 12 hours since Mason had raced out of the center, terrified by the thought of being poisoned by whatever gas had been used to kill his fellow marshals. Night had come and gone, as had his panic. When he returned to survey the scene early the next morning, he discovered that the center had found new occupants. For the past hour, he had watched as a sizable group of soldiers loaded scores, perhaps hundreds of crates into tractor-trailers. Even at a distance, he could see that the men wore matching black fatigues, not official military garb, but uniforms nonetheless. At first, he had thought that these men were some kind of makeshift force like York's Free Militia, which had been formed in response to the nation's lawlessness. After watching them for a while, though, he changed his mind. Unlike Alexis's ragtag army, the men loading the trucks were efficient and coordinated in their movements. There were also sentries set up all around their operation. It seemed much more likely that they were a professional paramilitary organization. The most pressing question was whether they were responsible for the death of the marshals. Given their timely arrival and obvious intent to pilfer something from the center, it seemed likely. That brought him to his second question. What exactly were they taking? Mason couldn't imagine anything stored there being important enough to stage a chemical attack, killing hundreds of lawmen in the process. As far as he knew, FLETC didn't house anything other than basic law enforcement training equipment. But these men had indeed found something, and whatever it was, it required numerous tractor-trailers to haul it out. As the trucks began to file out Gate 2, Mason dropped to the ground and climbed back into his pickup. He was about 200 yards away and parked in the yard of an abandoned house that offered a clear line of sight. The tractor-trailers all had different markings, suggesting that they had been picked up en route to the operation. Finding an armada of serviceable trucks would have been easy enough. The Superpox 99 virus had left more than 5 million such vehicles littering the roadways, some abandoned by their drivers, others acting as their final resting places. 2 armored military Humvees, painted in simple desert tan, led the convoy. 2 others protected the rear. Men stood ready behind Browning M2HB 50 caliber machine guns perched atop 2 of the 4 vehicles. Mason took a quick tally of the number of men. 2 sat in each tractor-trailer, and 4 were in each Humvee for a total of 26 well-armed soldiers. Unlike the militia Mason had fought in York, or even the convicts in Boone, he suspected that these men would not be easily overcome. If he were to have any chance of fighting the small army before him, it would require expert tactics and more than a little luck. Before any such confrontation, however, he needed to get some answers. Were they to blame for the horrific murders? If so, why had they done it? How he was going to get these answers was unclear at the moment. The one thing he did know was that he couldn't afford to squander the good fortune he'd had in catching them red-handed. As he watched the convoy turn west toward the Golden Isles Parkway, Mason started his truck and eased out into the road behind them. Bowie moved around in the bed of the truck before finally sticking his large head through the sliding rear window and whining loudly. "Don't worry," Mason said, reaching back with one hand to rub Bowie's head. "We're not going to let them get away, but we'll need to be careful. These men are more dangerous than any we've fought so far."